We have. Hello,
Hey.
everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. We've got a very interesting topic coming up tonight. We've got two of our experts here, Deb and Robbie. Robbie, Deb, would you like to share a little bit about yourselves and why you're so interested in talking about this topic?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first.
Absolutely.
Um,
Deb, go first.
yeah, so I think this is Robbie's baby. I think he'll be talking more than I will tonight, but I'm excited to be here with him because I am a dietitian and health coach with Second Nature. And I've been working with people taking this medication now for a year, which is unbelievable. So I've seen the progress people have made from day one to a year onwards and the transformations that people have gone through while taking the medication. I've also been there to see people going through challenges with it as well and support them through that, which has been amazing. So yeah, so I'm really excited to be here tonight.
Sweet. And yeah, I, like Deb, have been working on our sort of medication program since the start, which was, yeah, around, I guess, a year, 18 months ago, which is crazy. It's gone so fast. And I've been heavily involved in the development of the product, the content, the research, and I've spoken to probably over 100 people, 100 of our members, about their experience on the medication and the program. And it's just fascinating to hear their experience and how life-changing these medications can be. But also, I've always been really fascinated in human physiology and biology, and particularly the biology of hunger. I find the connection between the gut, the brain, the central nervous system, the body absolutely fascinating, and the way these drugs interact with that process is, yeah, really, really interesting. And I just find it, yeah, I just find it interesting. I said interesting about 14 times, but yeah, it's a topic I'm like fascinated with. So like really excited to present this. And I think as well, there's been a lot of bad press and a lot of myths launched into the media for sensationalist headlines and whatever it is. And I think it's good to dispel some of those this evening and maybe, calm some people's nerves around these medications and just bring some of the science to the fore, I think.
Amazing. Well, I think we'll be very interested to hear more about that, Robbie. So yeah, do you want to kick off with the presentation?
I will. I'm just going to hide your faces so they're not in my corner.
Absolutely fine.
But I'll bring them back for the Q&A. Cool. So yes, weight loss injections. Weight loss injections. How do they work, and should you try them? So let's get to it. So today we're going to cover the rise of GLP-1 injections. So the title is weight loss injections, but we are specifically focusing on GLP-1 medications as they are the kind of most effective ones in the market and really the only ones that are viable for most people, particularly in the UK. We'll be looking at, obviously at the beginning I was talking about the biology of hunger, so we'll be looking at the biology of how these GLP-1 medications work. And we'll be talking a bit about combining GLP-1s with lifestyle change, focusing a little bit on what the work we do at Second Nature and how it's integrated with GLP-1 medications to support long-term weight loss. And we'll also be talking a little bit about obesity and why no one should be ashamed of taking medication. And this has stemmed from many people we've spoken with talking about feeling guilt and shame about taking these medications and not wanting to talk to friends or family or even their doctor about them, which is super, super interesting. So we want to dispel the myth around that and why no one should be ashamed to be taking medications in this scenario. And yeah, we should have plenty of time for a Q&A. I think we should be able to go through the slides in around half an hour, hopefully. So it should leave us plenty of time for discussion and questions. And I think Gemma's probably already mentioned this, but when you're asking questions, obviously we've got the chat, which is fantastic, but we also have a Q&A button. So if you're on your mobile, you should have like a little menu of options at the bottom, and the Q&A buttons where I'd recommend putting in your questions. And if you're on your laptop, you should see that option too. Just because in the chat, we might miss the questions. So if you really want to get your questions in, please use that button. And then Gemma at the end will be going through them and ticking them off as we go. Okay. So before we do start, I just want to have a quick note on Second Nature, because some of you might be members, some of you might be familiar with Second Nature, but some of you might have absolutely no idea who we are until you signed up for this webinar. So just a quick note on who we are. So Second Nature, we are a weight loss program. So we've been around since 2016, and we've helped over 250,000 people now, which is incredible, lose weight without counting calories and outdated advice. And that is very much the ethos of Second Nature. We don't believe in rigid, strict dieting practices. We don't believe in, calorie counting, weighing of food, or any measurements or that try and put food into black and white categories. Yeah, it's very much we try and focus on sustainable weight loss and use psychological tools to help people learn about food and listen to their bodies in a more sustainable way. So with Second Nature, it's delivered entirely via an app. So you get access to a registered dietitian or a nutritionist. The program itself, you get access to daily articles, daily lessons, videos, tasks that are all designed by our in-house content team, which includes nutritionists, dietitians, psychologists. And yeah, you have the support of your health coach in the app 5 days a week, which is super cool. And yeah, we have 7 years of clinical data proving our effectiveness. On average, this is our non-medication program, but on average, people lose around 15 pounds and sustain that over 12 months. And in our NHS programs, up to 40% of people see their blood sugars reduce from the type 2 diabetes range into normal levels, which is super cool as well. And we've got some pretty established partners. So we've been working in the NHS since 2016. And over half of all NHS health and care boards now in the UK now use Second Nature, which is pretty cool. And yeah, we've been a trusted Vitality partner since, when did we start this? I think 2021. So I think we've been partnering with Vitality Insurance since 2021. And that is for weight loss, and weight management, and for type 2 diabetes as well. So if you're on Vitality, you can get Second Nature through your health insurer. So if you are interested after today in joining Second Nature, all you have to do is head to our website and take our quiz. Or if you're interested in learning more about weight loss, nutrition, health, GLP-1s, we've got over 700 articles on the Second Nature website for free that you can read and learn more about health and nutrition and etc. etc. Cool. Okay. Now that spiel's out the way, let's get cracking with the main section of the webinar. So let's look at the rise of GLP-1 medications. So this is just a brief history into GLP-1 medications, particularly in the UK. So the very first GLP-1 medication was called exenatide. I think I've pronounced that correctly. So it was approved for adults living with type 2 diabetes in 2005, so nearly 20 years ago. And it was a synthetic version of a peptide, which is basically just a protein or an amino acid that was found in the saliva of the Gila monster lizard. So yeah, super fascinating. And it was found to basically completely mimic the actions of the hormone GLP-1 that is produced in the body, which is super interesting. Fast forward 5 to 10 years, the next sort of big one you could say was liraglutide, which sold under the brand name Saxenda, and that was approved for type 2 diabetes in 2010, and it later received approval for weight loss in 2014. So in terms of the history of GLP-1s, they're primarily focused on managing blood sugar levels because GLP-1 is involved in insulin release, which we'll be talking about later, to help manage blood sugar levels. But with each sort of generation of GLP-1 medications that came through, they were discovering more actions of GLP-1, the hormone, and they were discovering that was having an impact on appetite. It was having an impact on weight loss too. So Saxenda received approval for weight loss in 2014. So that is a decade ago, and it is still approved in the UK for weight loss. And next is semaglutide. So this is really where GLP-1 medications probably became much more famous, I guess you could say. So Ozempic was originally approved and is still only approved for type 2 for people living with type 2 diabetes, and that was in 2017. However, it was soon started being used for weight loss due to its appetite suppressing effects. And really, it became much more famous in the media because celebrities in the US were essentially using it how we call off-label. So essentially using it for weight loss when it's approved. It's not approved for weight loss. It's only approved for type 2 diabetes. And yeah, people were seeing significant weight loss with Ozempic, and hence the headlines and hence the rise of Ozempic as a weight loss medication and semaglutide. But what's interesting is while all of this was going on, Wegovy, which you could call the game changer, Wegovy is the same drug as Ozempic. So a lot of people are slightly confused about Wegovy and Ozempic and what the difference is. There is no difference. It's exactly the same drug. The only difference is Wegovy is a different brand name. and it's available in higher doses than and it's approved for weight loss. Now, we call this the game changer because, well, it's been called the game changer because it was the first weight loss medication really, which basically saw weight loss that we've not really seen in clinical trials to date. So on average, people on Wegovy lose 16% of their weight compared to their baseline. So if you weighed 100 kilograms, that would be a 16 kilogram weight loss after 1 year. Now, that is game changing for people because we have good data to show that if you lose just 10% of your body weight, let's say, so you weigh 100 kilograms and you lose 10 kilograms of your weight, ideally fat loss, but overall the weight loss would be, say, 10 kilograms. We know losing 10% of your weight significantly reduces your likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and all chronic diseases associated with the complications related to obesity. So to lose beyond 10% is very, very significant. And these are, and this is amounts we've just not seen before. So semaglutide really was a game changer. And I think the other element of it was that it was far more, it was tolerated much better than Saxenda. And we'll get to the side effects and things like that in a bit. But generally, people on semaglutide tolerate it much better than they do liraglutide, which is Saxenda. And it's a weekly injection versus Saxenda, which is a daily injection, which many people might not feel comfortable taking injections anyway. So to take it every day might be uncomfortable, versus semaglutide just taken once a week. So that might be a lot more tolerable for people. Next, you might have heard this being referenced in, I've actually, minor typo here, that should be a capital K for anyone that's hyper-focused on this slide. So apologies. But the next one, known as the King Kong of weight loss medications, effectively, was Mounjaro, or tirzepatide, which is the drug. So it's described, I got the capital K right here. It was described as King Kong because of the astronomical amount of weight that people were losing on these medications in the clinical trials. So after 2 years, on average, people were losing around 26% of their body weight on tirzepatide, on Mounjaro, which again, far outweighs any clinical trials we've seen with any weight loss medication or any weight loss intervention to date. There are very, very old starvation trials, which you would see this dramatic amount of weight, as you're probably not surprised, but we don't want to starve people to help them lose weight. So in terms of the modern era, to see 26% of weight loss in an intervention trial is startling, to be honest. It's unheard of. So yeah, Mounjaro tirzepatide references the King Kong purely based on the volume of weight loss that was achieved after 2 years on this medication. So it's around 10% more effective, you could say, if we're purely looking at weight loss compared to Wegovy and semaglutide. And additionally, alongside that, not only is it more effective for weight loss on average, it's also the safety profile is fairly similar. So the side effects and the severity of serious adverse events in Mounjaro and Wegovy trials were fairly similar. So for people that need to lose more weight, this was probably a bit of a revelation. Cool. I think I had one more slide there. Nope. Okay, so in terms of weight loss outcomes, direct comparison, you've got Mounjaro, which after a year is around 25%, Wegovy around 15 to 70%, and Saxenda around 5 to 7%. Now, these are averages, so it really is depending on the individual. You will have people on Wegovy who lose this amount of weight and maybe more. You will have people on Mounjaro not losing this amount of weight. You will have people on Saxenda that maybe lose a lot more weight, because it's not just about the medication, it's also about the lifestyle and the diets and the quality of your eating habits alongside the medication that will determine your effectiveness, if you like. But yes, on average, these are the direct comparisons that we have based on randomized controlled trials. So, and in terms of why is Mounjaro so much more effective, it's possible we might do a webinar on Mounjaro specifically in the future to look at the biology of this medication in more detail. But for today, we wanted to keep it fairly, fairly broad. But the basics of it are Mounjaro mimics 2 hormones in the body that are related to lowering hunger, that help the body manage its intake. versus Wegovy and Saxenda, which just mimic the one. So Saxenda and Wegovy mimic the hormone GLP-1, we should be talking about in a second. Mounjaro also mimics GLP-1, but it also mimics another hormone called GIP. Now, I'd love to use their full names, but they're very long and complex, and I can't really remember them properly. And in terms of side effects, with GLP-1 medications, unsurprisingly, based on its effects on our hunger and the gut, the most common side effects are GI related, so nausea, diarrhea, constipation, vomiting as well, not very nice. Fatigue is also very common. We're seeing fatigue is an interesting one because it's not one that's reported as much in the clinical trials, which is surprising because it is very common. And we'll be talking about that with Deborah towards the end, but tiredness and fatigue is something that we see quite consistently on our program, particularly at the start. It's important to say that these side effects are typically transient. So what happens is when you take your first dose, most people, I think it's up to 80%, will experience side effects at least once when taking these medications. But what often happens is as your body adapts to the medication and you slowly get used to it effectively, they tend to subside and they tend to ease off in the few days after you take the first injection. They also tend to happen during dose escalation. So say on Wegovy, when you move from 0.25 to 0.5, you typically see maybe an uptick in those effects, but they ease off. For example, and it can take a while to get used to a dose before you have to move up. We've had some of our members who stay on Wegovy, for example, 1.7, and they might stay on that dose for a little bit longer because their side effects are, just about tolerable, but still a bit uncomfortable before they then move up to 2.4. And then, reassuringly, their side effects do subside when the body adapts fully. In terms of severity of side effects, it's quite rare to have very severe. So in terms of side effects that are so severe that they are a threat to life, I think it's actually less than 1%, let's say, in Mounjaro and Wegovy. It's very, very small. To my memory, in the semaglutide trial, which lasted for 68 weeks, so just over a year, there was only 3 instances where they would define it as very severe and a threat to life. In terms of severe adverse side effects which lead to discontinuation, so that they make life very, very challenging, but they're not a threat to, an immediate threat to life, it's around 10 to 13% with Mounjaro and Wegovy. So 10 to 13% of people, it's quite likely, will not be able to tolerate the medication due to the side effects, so they come off. But with Saxenda, it was much higher, almost double, so it was around 27%. And again, that could be related to the daily injection dose. Could be related to the chemistry, specifically of the molecule and how it reacts with the body. And we are seeing with the development of these medications more and more, the side effect profiles are improving, if you like. Yes. So just to summarize that section. So GLP-1 medications were first approved in 2005 for people living with type 2, and newer variations have been used for weight loss since 2014. Semaglutide was seen as the game changer as it outperformed typical weight loss programs by a substantial margin. And then research showed that tirzepatide, which was referred to as the King Kong, leads to weight loss of up to 26% after 2 years. And side effects are typically transient and ease after the body adapts. But as with all medications, some people just can't tolerate them at all and have to come off. Serious adverse side effects seem to affect fewer than 10%. And in terms of very serious adverse events that are an immediate threat to life, it's less than 1%. It's it's in the single digits on the trials that were based on thousands of people. So they are very safe for the vast majority of people based on the research we have so far. Cool. So we're just going to move on to how they work. And to start with, it's important to very briefly cover the gut-brain hunger axis and how the biology of hunger works, because then it will really help to understand how these medications are interacting with the body. So what is the gut-brain hunger axis? It's effectively the two-way communication pathway between your gut and your brain. It's the flow of information. The flow of information can influence how our gut and brain function. So what is going on consistently is when you're eating food, your gut is sending signals to your brain to let it know what nutrients you've consumed, in what quantities, what the type of food is, etc., etc., etc. The brain will receive these signals based on it, and these are sent through via hormones through the vagus nerve and the central nervous system. And the brain will receive these signals, particularly the hypothalamus, which is the appetite control center in the brain, if you like. And it will go, okay, cool, we've got lots of protein, we've got carbohydrates, we've got fats. I can lower hunger, and then the brain will in turn send signals down to the body to lower the feelings of hunger and lower the desire to seek out food. So I think this is an important component of what we're about to cover in terms of how these medications work. Is these hormones don't just lower that physical sensation of hunger, they also lower the desire to seek out food, because I think we can all agree that we've had those times where we're seeking food even if we're not hungry. Maybe it's for something sweet, or maybe we're just a little bit peckish. We're not hungry, but we just fancy something. And that isn't based on a physical requirement for food. It could be environmentally triggered. It could be habitually triggered. There's all these other things that are communicating and influencing our behavior and how we eat. So these hormones, particularly GLP-1, which we'll be talking about in a minute, also calm down that feeling of food noise and lower our desire to seek out more food. So it's not just the physical, it's also that kind of psychological drive to eat. That's important. So, and this is how GLP-1 specifically works. When you eat a meal, I'm not sure what meal this was, it looks like salmon and pesto and vegetables. The food obviously travels through your stomach down into your gastrointestinal tract. Food reaches the small intestine, and when it's in there, there are specific cells lining the walls of our guts which trigger the release of certain hormones. So let's say we eat protein, a meal with, this meal with salmon and pesto, it had protein, it had fat, it had fiber. That travels through your gut and it triggers the release of GLP-1. So GLP-1 is this hormone which is released into the body and does everything we just said: lower that feeling of hunger, lower that desire to seek out food. But what's interesting about the hormone GLP-1 and how the body controls the different levels of these hormones in the body is, after just 2 minutes, 50% of the GLP-1 that was released from the gut is broken down and removed from the body by this enzyme called DPP4. You could think of it a bit like Pac-Man. It's almost like the little ball goes out into the body, which is GLP-1, and Pac-Man comes along and breaks it down and removes half of it within 2 minutes. And I think within 4 minutes, it's something like 75% is already gone. I'm paraphrasing those figures, by the way, but it's around those margins. So it's quite a significant amount. So GLP-1 clearly isn't designed by the body in its natural sense to manage our hunger for the long term. Because if you think about it, if our ancestors, for example, wanted to seek out food because it boosts our chances of survival. So if we had this powerful hormone that would keep us feeling full and hungry all the time, that's a problem, because we actually do want to seek out food because we need to eat to survive. So the body's clearly designed this mechanism in which to manage the impact that this hormone can have on our hunger and desire to eat via this enzyme, which breaks it down. And you can imagine, you eat breakfast, hunger goes down, GLP-1 levels go up, and then after a few hours, they're down again, and you're hungry again, ready for lunch. So, and this is where the impact of the medications comes in. So GLP-1, the hormone, is removed from the system by DPP4, so it's not resistant. It gets removed from the body quickly, and you feel hungrier within a few hours. GLP-1 medications, however, which mimic GLP-1, Saxenda, Wegovy, Mounjaro, they bypass the DPP4 Pac-Man pathway, if you like. So it says semaglutide here, but semaglutide, tirzepatide, liraglutide, they mimic GLP-1 and are resistant to this enzyme. So it doesn't get removed as quickly, and you feel fuller for longer. And after about 4 to 8 weeks, your body reaches what we call a steady state with these medications. So it can take a while for them to have their full effect. So for anyone who might be on them or has friends or family who are on them, if you hear them say, yeah, I've just started out on these medications, I still feel hungry after 4 or 5 days post-injection, entirely normal. The body's levels of these GLP-1 medications will reach a steady state. And that's why we have a gradual increase in their dose over 5 to 6 months, because we're trying to build up that tolerance level, and gradually those levels will reach the steady state within 4 to 8 weeks. So, key points of that section. Our gut-brain connection could be considered our hunger regulation network. Communication between the hormones released from our guts, the central nervous system, and the brain help us manage our intake. GLP-1s work because they provide consistent levels of a mimicked GLP-1 hormone in the blood. This means our brain is constantly receiving that message to lower the desire to eat and seek out more food. Okay, so if you have any questions about what we've covered so far, please put them in the Q&A. I can see 11 have come through already, which is fantastic. Lots of things going on in the chat, which is great, and we'll get to that at the Q&A at the end. Now, we want to talk about obesity as a disease because people living with obesity receive a lot of stigma, and you'll often hear more controversial views around it's a personal choice. People are choosing to overeat and live with obesity, and so they just need to eat less and exercise more, and the world will be cured of this, significant threat to our healthcare system and population health. Which is obviously something we don't believe at Second Nature. It's a fundamental belief of mine as well that that is not true. And obesity is a disease. It is a chronic disease, and this is why. It's been defined as a disease since the 1930s by the World Health Organization, so that's pretty significant. And no one should feel guilty about receiving treatment for a disease they're living with, whether you're living with cancer, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, any other chronic conditions that are related to obesity as well, and lifestyle. No one would feel guilty about taking medications for those conditions. And this is kind of our belief with obesity as well, if it's clinically relevant. And with obesity stigma, and this is stigma from the media, it can be from friends, from family, from the public, it can be even from our healthcare practitioners who aren't familiar with the etiology of obesity too. But research has clearly shown that obesity stigma can exacerbate the complications associated with the condition, such as type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and stroke. So counterintuitively, well, maybe not counterintuitively, but being mean to people who are living with obesity about their condition makes the condition worse. So yeah, pretty intuitive when you think about it, actually. And obesity multifactorial etiology, which is essentially a development of the disease, which involves genetic, biological, behavioral, and environmental factors that go beyond individual choices. And based on the World Health Organization, this multifactorial etiology meets the criteria for a disease. It goes far beyond individual choices, which are, of course, related. Some people are making decisions day by day with informed consent. However, obesity is not a condition that is not influenced by other factors, and it goes far beyond just eating less and exercising more. If it were that simple, we wouldn't be living in a world where I think 30% of the US or 70% of people in the USA are overweight or obese, and the numbers aren't that high in the UK, but they are extremely high and climbing. And as I was alluding to before, as a society, we don't shame people living with type 2 diabetes to take insulin, despite the majority of type 2 diabetes being linked to lifestyle and obesity. So if we're being consistent, as a society, we shouldn't shame people for taking weight loss medications. Yeah. So key points. Obesity has been defined as a disease since the 1930s by the WHO. The various factors that contribute to weight gain mean the criteria for disease. It meets the criteria for a disease that goes beyond individual choice. And no one should feel guilty or ashamed about taking weight loss medications. So, is it a magic pill? No, it's not a magic pill. Weight loss injections are most effective when combined with developing healthy habits. And it's our belief that they're not a substitution for a healthy lifestyle. We don't believe that people should just be taking the medications and almost using it as an excuse to live an unhealthy lifestyle, if you like. We believe it's much more worthwhile from a psychological, physical, and philosophical level to combine a healthy lifestyle and yeah. So they can be used to kickstart weight loss while we take the time needed to develop a healthy lifestyle. That's our core belief. However, some of us will have a predisposition to obesity from genetic predispositions where eating within energy balance is too challenging without support. So a big question we get at Second Nature is, will I be able to come off these medications? And I think for a large proportion of people, absolutely they will, as long as you develop the healthy habits required to sustain that weight loss in the long term. But there will be some people, I'm not sure in figures, I think the research will tell us in the future, but there will be certain genetic predispositions to obesity in terms of the biology of hunger. That mean these medications might be required for some people for longer, even for life, if it's clinically relevant and appropriate to do so. I'm just going to bring in Debs here because I think, and Gemma, to be fair, because I think this is a pretty good opportunity to talk about why we think this is an important point in terms of combining healthy habits with the medication and some of the experiences that you've seen, Deborah, with people on the program.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I have to admit that when I started coaching these groups, I was a little bit skeptical. And my main concern, I think, was that people would take the medication and think that they didn't need to make all of the lifestyle changes that went along with it. I think I've been pleasantly surprised, and I think the majority of the people that have joined us are very, very serious about making changes to their diet and lifestyle, which is probably why they signed up with us. And I've seen some major transformations with people, which has been really, really amazing. And one thing that we always kind of press home is the importance of having a balanced diet, and we really guide people through that so that they know, alongside this medication, how they can support their health in other ways and really fill all those gaps in their diet to kind of give them the long-term habits that they can keep going, whether they decide to stay on the medication or come off the medication, but really to give them that kind of long-term base for good health. So I just wanted to share a few quotes actually relating to this, if that's okay. So one of my members the other day said that without the constant hunger pangs, I'm finding it so much easier to make great food choices. So I thought this was really brilliant because the medication is giving people the space to actually focus on making those healthy choices. And they're finding that they have less cravings for a lot of those foods that, like you were mentioning, Robbie, that people just kind of pick on, or they feel a desire for that isn't really hunger, it's just a craving that we're feeling. And another quote that I wanted to share was, generally, I would say my appetite no longer feels so urgent. My meals are about the same size as they were before, although generally they're more healthy. But the biggest change is not having second breakfast, sandwiches and crisps for my car journey home. So it's just really helping people to make those balanced choices and to really focus on their main meals as opposed to all the little snacks that went around that. So yeah, so that's one of the things that I'm seeing. Like you said, it does vary from person to person, and not everybody can manage their hunger levels in the same way. So it really does boil down to the individual, what we're seeing, but we are seeing some amazing results.
That's so interesting. Something you said there, Deborah, really stuck with me. My appetite is no longer so urgent, which I think is fascinating.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Cool. And yeah, in terms of Second Nature and how we're doing this, so our program is very comprehensive. It's not just about medication. The medication is a major component of helping people lose weight and managing their hunger levels. But with the support of the Second Nature health coaching team, you can manage the side effects, building new healthy habits and overcoming challenges along the way. Just because you take the medication doesn't mean you're completely immune to the ups and downs and challenges of life and the stresses that can often lead to overeating and snacking and all of the things that can often influence our ability to maintain our intake. So yeah, it's for us, it's lifestyle and medication, and not just medication on its own, which is really important. And I think as well, it's really important. I know one of the parts of our title was, should you take these medications? And we're not here to push anyone or convince anyone to take them. It's always something you should speak with your doctor, your medical team, We do have people that are joining the program without consulting their GP, and of course, they're within their rights to do that. They're not tied to their GP. But I think it is always worth getting some medical advice from your doctor if you have a good relationship with them, to at least discuss this and the possibility of it, and just gaining their insights. And we actually had a member this week who told their GP after being terrified of doing so, and he joked that he'd been on it for 6 months as well and lost, like, I don't know, a couple of stone. And yeah, I think that's it's super interesting. It's not yeah, I think that helps with the whole discussion. That no one should be ashamed. It's important that we have open discussions around this. Okay, so just a quick summary of that final section. So obesity has been defined as a disease since the 1930s by the WHO. The various factors. I feel like I've just copied and pasted this slide. Have I already done this, Gemma? I don't think I updated this. I'm really sorry. But the key points are that we essentially fundamentally believe that lifestyle and medication should be combined, and it's most effective when that is possible. So funny, we found like the smallest typo when we looked through these slides earlier, but failed to see that I had a duplicate slide, but that's all good. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming and attending and putting your comments into the chat. I think we're going to go to the Q&A now, and Gemma, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so everyone can see us.
Fabulous. Thank you, Robbie. And yeah, look, in these webinars, there's always something that's going to go wrong.
Always.
But that was an amazing presentation. I think a lot of people, especially myself included, will take away a lot of key points there. And also, I think the biggest thing is about the stigma, because it's still quite new to a lot of people, and it's understanding what's going to work for you, because what works for one is not always going to work for another. So yeah, we've had a lot of questions, so I will get cracking so we can answer as many as possible. I think the first one that people are asking, we had a few people ask this, about the availability of these and whether they're available in Scotland, in Wales. Can you help with that at all?
Do they mean, in terms of the different countries, like via the NHS, there is restricted availability at the moment. So I know the NHS we're a part of the NHS pilot for Wegovy. In terms of Mounjaro, I think the pilot for that might take a bit longer, but there's no confirmed date on that yet. In terms of the NHS availability, that will be via Tier 3 weight management services, so that will be a very strict criteria. In terms of availability from private sellers like Second Nature and others, it should be available across the UK effectively. But of course, the availability depends on your eligibility. And for us, we have a very strict eligibility criteria, which we can't present because people can fib in their quiz and consultation. And yeah, we have a very strict entry criteria. So the availability across the UK is quite broad, I think. Like, for example, we have very reliable sources of the medication, but it obviously depends if you're eligible or not.
And if people do want to, if they're considering joining this or joining Second Nature in general, they can go straight to our website, can't they, and do their quiz flow?
Exactly. Go through the quiz, the consultation, and what happens is the answers go through to our clinical team who assess and obviously either put people through, or sadly, we have to reject a lot of people too, because it is a very yeah, it's obviously a very specific medication for a specific type of person. So
some of the questions we've had as well are based around medical conditions and side effects with taking this. I kind of think that we already know the answer to this in terms of referring you back to your GP, and I know this is something that will come up a lot. But yeah, when it comes to side effects and people having medical conditions, what would you suggest, Robbie, Deb?
Yeah, so I think Robbie went through the side effects really nicely earlier on. And in most cases, the side effects that we're seeing are minor. As a health coach, what I'm seeing mostly come through is constipation is the big one. Nearly everybody is getting that at some stage. In most cases, it's manageable and it does ease over time. Obviously, other gut symptoms like nausea, vomiting can also occur for people. Again, we do spend time talking through these symptoms with people, and we usually can come to some conclusions for how to manage them, also in liaison with the clinical team. In terms of more serious side effects, they are very, very rare. But I know one that's been in the media is gastroparesis, which is a stomach condition, which also can happen actually in people with diabetes. So it isn't, you know, it's not something that's really isolated with these medications, and it's extremely rare. So like anything, I think it's a matter of weighing up your individual case and what's right for you. And as Robbie was saying, talking about that with your GP, about whether the pros would outweigh the cons for you personally.
And in terms of combining it with other medications, Gemma, that will definitely be a conversation, yeah, for sure, with the GP, and that will be something that is assessed on any sign-up process, any prescription application. What other medications are you taking? And the clinical team and pharmacists will analyze that and make sure it's appropriate. I'm not sure like what specific medications people can and can't be on with these medications. I'm sure it adds a complex layer, a layer of complexity to any prescription. But yeah, it's always best just to be open. And what might happen is a GP might decide that, for example, oh, I think it's worth coming off this, say, blood pressure medication, for example, because it's possible that by taking this GLP-1, your blood pressure will inherently go down because of the improvement in your weight and blood sugar, etc. So yeah, I think like you said at the start, always consulting a medical team with questions like that. And please don't lie on any prescription application and say you're not taking any medical any other medications, because it's only, you're taking a big risk there for sure. So I think it's worth always playing safe. It's never
Very,
worth.
very important point. Yeah, very
Yeah,
important.
yeah. And I know like people are, there is a desperation around for these medications, which I can appreciate and understand, but it doesn't mean you should be risking your health in the short term. Like it's not worth it there for sure.
Absolutely. And one of the questions I've seen that keeps popping up is about weight and people keeping their weight off. I know you covered in the presentation, I know Debbie was saying as well about habit change and how habit change is actually really important for keeping the weight off. But in your experience of working with these members and just people that you know in general, do you think that people keep the weight off with the medication?
Yeah, so obviously when I'm working with people, I'm working with them when they're on the medication. So it's really hard for me to say what happens to them when they come off the medication. And I think this is something that we will know more about further down the line, because they are relatively new medications. But I'm sure, Robbie, you have a lot to add to this as well, because I know you're quite up on the research here. But I think a lot of people's success when they come off the medication really boils down to the habit changes that they make while they're on the medication. And there is some research showing that people who can put in place a really good exercise program, for example, and keep that up, have a much better chance of keeping the weight off at the end. So I think it's, you know, if people are taking the medication and expecting it to be, you know, a single bullet that's going to change everything for them, they probably will gain all the weight when they come off it. Whereas that if they use the medication as kind of an opportunity to make changes in their lifestyle and exercise and their diet, they're the people that will see long-term change, hopefully, moving forward. But yeah, there's lots to tell, and I'm sure, Robbie, you have some things to add as well.
Yeah, well, I think only expanding on it, Des, but you're absolutely right, and the research is quite clear. So there's two large post-analysis on the trials with Mounjaro and Wegovy showing they essentially put people on the medication for 36 weeks and then randomized people to either placebo or continuing on the medication. And both trials showed that, you know, when you come off the medication, I suppose you could use a term cold turkey, you do regain most of the weight. Like on average, people regain most of the weight back. But I think this is a strong indicator of what Deborah was saying in terms of the importance of lifestyle while you're on the medications. But to say, in a reverse of that, in terms of, you know, it's not always the case that when you come off the medications, you will regain the weight. So there was a very recent trial that has not been published yet, but it was presented at the European Congress of Obesity from a Danish company, very similar to Second Nature. And what they did is they put people who are on Ozempic on a 9-week titration off program. And the company are very similar to Second Nature in terms of building healthy habits, encouraging exercise, healthy diet, improving your psychological relationship with food. And they slowly titrated people off the medication over 9 weeks rather than, you know, just coming off straight away like they did in those trials. And what they showed is after a further 26 weeks after that 9-week titration, 48 people on average, there was no weight regain whatsoever. So they maintained a stable weight up to, what would that be, like 35 weeks or so after coming off the medication in effect. So I think that's very, very promising. And we are designing a titration off pathway within Second Nature for those people that want it. So the idea with us is you reach your long-term weight loss goal, whatever that might be. I think there's a great definition of weight loss called your best weight. Don't use BMI. We don't, like, BMI is not the right tool to use. Whatever weight you feel you can maintain that will help you lead the life you want to is your best weight. That might be BMI 29, it might be BMI 24. It doesn't really matter if you feel happy and you're healthy. And so whatever that looks like, and when we reach that, we will then provide the personalized support to help you come off the medication slowly at the right pace to help you maintain that weight loss. So yeah, I think there's a lot to discover on our side, but it's also very exciting. And yeah, lots to look forward to in that sense, in terms of helping people maintain that weight loss for us, I think.
For sure. And just to add to that, so a few years ago, I did work directly with people who were on Saxenda, who had come off Saxenda as well. And the biggest thing I noticed as a nutritionist, because I'd help them with managing their food, because obviously with a reduced appetite, you don't want to eat as much. What people would notice as they come off the medication, the appetite would come back. But if they had prolonged in their habit change, so if they'd been on the medication for, say, 6 months and they'd actually formed new habits with their eating, it was much easier for them to maintain the loss that they had made compared to going back to old habits and eating energy dense foods, because that contributes again to, you know, weight gain and health issues and all of that. So yeah, it just goes back to really making those small changes that are going to be realistic and they're going to last.
Absolutely. And if we're linking the healthy habits to, if we talked about the biology of hunger earlier and the relationship between the gut and the brain, that system functions better when we're active, so physically active, when we eat a healthy diet, when we're psychologically in a good place as well, so stress, low mood, all of these psychological factors influence the structure and function of the brain, which in turn influences the structure and function of the gut and the communications between the two. So everything matters, like how you sleep, how you think, how you eat, how you move. That all integrates into our biology of hunger and our ability to maintain our intake. So if we can put it in that context, that's why it's so important, because if you lose the medication, which is effectively doing those things for you, if you rely on the medication solely, yeah, like Deborah said, and you've just mentioned, Gemma, you come off the medication, the appetite comes back, and it's like, well, yeah, because you haven't actually sort of fixed the communication pathways. You've just used something to cover it and make it work for you in the short term, if that makes sense. So yeah, super important.
So true. And I think our habits are like a domino effect, right? You fix one and then the others tend to fall into place. We do actually have a question here about this, like how much the lifestyle and exercise element is needed to go alongside the injections. Because I think what a few people are saying is that some of those lifestyle aspects are things that they struggle with and they can't. So, you know, can you lose weight, maintain it just through your eating habits?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, you know, I think it's something that crops up a lot is we give people lots of recommendations. And within that, there are people that think, well, I can't do that aspect of it, so I'm going to fail. Or, you know, maybe I can't do the exercise, or I've got a disability, or there's something I can't do. But we see success in lots of people coming from lots of backgrounds. And really, every little step that you make and every little change that you make is going to count. So you don't have to do everything. You don't have to be perfect and have the perfect exercise routine, or even do every single nutrition or diet recommendation that we make. Doing what you can do and doing your best, it will make a difference. So yeah, so I think every little change that you make counts.
Absolutely. And I think, like you said earlier, Deborah, how it's like a window, like taking the medication. It's almost like this the cognitive strain of thinking about food constantly without the medication before, where it's almost like there's this calm and people are able to take the time to build these habits because they're no longer obsessing over food all the time. And I found that one of the most interesting parts of this experience we've had on the program with our members is that it's like this, it opens the door to people feel more open to change and making those changes compared to when they were before. So many people will say they struggle with those lifestyle factors, which is understandable. But yeah, these medications do seem to have a significant impact on people's ability to stick with them and cement them, which is pretty cool.
Do you know what? It's interesting that you say that, because it's a nice segue into one of the questions I was going to ask. Someone asked if the meds are still as effective if you're an emotional eater.
Great question. What do you think, Deb?
Yeah, it is a great question. And I definitely do see certain people still struggling with an element of emotional eating. So I wouldn't say that for every person. And again, everybody is different and their experience of the medication is different. For a lot of people, they do say they've got a complete sense of freedom where they just don't crave food the way they used to. So that in itself kind of removes a lot of that emotional attachment and that emotional drive to eat. Other people feel that they still do have a need that needs filling, and that need traditionally has been filled by food, and that won't disappear overnight. So I do often work with people to try and find something else to fill that need. What else is going to help you to relax or help you de-stress at the end of the day? So a lot of it is finding something else that will fill whatever need you have that's unmet. So I would say yes and no. It definitely helps, and for some people it will help it completely, and for other people it will help it to a certain extent. But there's still work to do. There's still, elements there that need to be filled.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Deb. I think it all depends on the stage of change that you're in. If you're going on the medication without wanting to make changes to your psychology, I think you will struggle to keep the weight off, for sure.
Absolutely.
And also struggle to change your mindset in general.
For sure.
Right, we've got so many questions in here. I'm just going through, making sure that they're not repeat ones. I think someone was asking as well about Mounjaro, whether it's available now, because I think some people have seen that it's not available until February next year.
Ooh, that's interesting. No, it is available now. There is less availability of the very highest doses. But with Mounjaro, it's a bit different compared to Wegovy. So with Wegovy, the approval, like you can maintain for longer on lower doses, like I was describing with a few of our members earlier, but typically after 5 months, you kind of have to get up to 2.4, unless your side effects are such that you need to maintain low dose. Whereas Mounjaro has been specifically approved with maintenance doses. So the 5, the 10, and the 15 are maintenance doses. So typically, it might be that most people might not get up to the higher doses anyway, and it might take 6 months to a year to reach 15 milligrams anyway. So there is less availability of the higher doses, but for us, we've got no issues with supply at the moment. So Mounjaro is available for sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Robbie. And an interesting question: do you lose your enjoyment for food if you take this medication?
I was just looking at that one, Jem, because there are so many questions, but that one
Great
stood out to me
minds.
as well. And again, it's very individual, and I think probably people have read stories in the media of people who have lost their enjoyment of food or something that they've complained about. And it can happen. It can reduce your enjoyment of food for sure, but not in every case. And in my experience of working with people seem on the whole to still enjoy their food. They just have less of a drive to have it. And I think I might even have a quote here from somebody. Yeah, let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, so just one person said, I don't snack, I don't obsess about what I'll eat next. I can literally just focus on eating well and stopping when I'm full. It's a revelation. So, people are making lots of comments that they just know when to stop eating, but they are still enjoying that food. And people are sharing amazing recipes that I work with, and they're really putting a lot of effort into trying new foods. And yeah, so I would say on the whole, people still enjoy food, but there will be, again, a subset that will lose their enjoyment of food, which is really important. And I completely understand why somebody would not want to be on the medication if they lost their enjoyment for food. So again, it's not a perfect solution for every single person out there.
Absolutely. And we do have some research on this as well. And it is the exception rather than the rule. I think it's something like less than 5% will experience that more severe suppression of appetite where they've lost all desire to eat and have no enjoyment of food whatsoever. That is quite rare. So like Deborah said, it's like it means it's not perfect for everyone for sure. Because it's like is life without food worth living? Obviously not. We can't live without it, but also we want to enjoy our food as well. So yeah, yeah, it's the exception rather than the rule for sure.
Yeah, I agree totally. So I know you spoke in the presentation a little bit about fatigue and tiredness. Could you expand on that and explain a bit more about what the fatigue is like when taking the medication?
Yeah, it's a really tough one because I have not taken the medication myself. So obviously this isn't something that I've experienced or felt, but it is something that crops up a lot. I would say for most people it's short-lived. It's kind of at the earlier stages when they're adapting to the medication. And some people will just say that they're completely flat, that they need to rest a lot, particularly in the few days after taking the medication. Some people will go through a phase where they might find it tricky to exercise. They just don't have that extra energy and kind of get up and go. But it does tend for the majority of people to taper off once they adjust to the medication. So it's usually a temporary kind of sensation that they go through.
Do you know
But
why that could happen? Why the fatigue could happen? Because for me as a nutritionist, my first thing would be maybe because you're not eating as much, you haven't got as much energy going in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably at play for some people. I think one thing I'm always explaining to people is just because you're not hungry doesn't mean your body doesn't need energy and nutrients. Your body still needs those. So even when that hunger isn't there, I think some people can think, oh, I'm not hungry, I don't need to eat. But that's not the case. You still need to nourish your body. So definitely in some cases, I would say it's a lack of food. And, we can work with people as well to try and educate them around that. But I think there's more going on as well. I think there's more of a direct impact of the drug in the body or the body adapting to the medication. Robbie, I don't know whether you have anything to add on that from your knowledge.
There's limited research, but there is a theoretical base of the way GLP-1 interacts with the central nervous system and the areas of the brain. So I can't remember what area of the brain it was, but there's a brain area that's responsible for our sleep-wake cycle, and there are GLP-1 receptors on that part of the brain, which means that GLP-1 clearly has a relationship to the brain area that is regulating our sleep-wake cycle, which is fascinating. Whether that's involved in it, not sure. I think, like you said, Deborah and Jem, your intuition, I think largely it's people not eating enough. Because yes, we have to eat fewer calories to lose weight. However, we still need to reach a level where we're still providing enough nourishment for our bodies, like you said, Deborah. So I think that's probably the majority. But like you said as well, Deb, there's clearly, there's probably also a link to the relationship with GLP-1, the hormone, and the regulation of our sleep-wake cycle and our energy levels. That's playing a part too. But we actually released a paper on our semaglutide participants this year, earlier this year, and 44% of people said they experienced fatigue in the first 4 weeks, but after 8 weeks that dropped by half. So clearly, like you said, Deborah, as well, it's like it's clearly impacting people early on, but as they're adapting to the medication, it's transient and easing off. So yeah, it's super fascinating, but seems to be it seems to ease off after like 4 to 8 weeks for most people, which is reassuring, I suppose.
For sure. And it leads quite nicely into a question that someone's asked about the recommended diet to be on. Whether you are familiar with Second Nature or you don't know about Second Nature at all, we recommend using the balanced plate approach, which breaks it down into like a source of protein, source of fat, complex carbs and vegetables, because this is what's going to nourish you. This is what's going to feed your body with the nutrients that are needed, but it's also going to help to fill you full in both body and mind. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's basically exactly what you said. We're not a diet. We're not going to say low fat, low carb, Mediterranean. It's a whole food approach. It's based on foods that will keep you feeling fuller for longer. Our approach is low in ultra processed foods, high in nourishing whole foods, and the balance, like you said, Gemma, is what we call our balanced plate model, which is available actually online. On one of our articles, we talk about it in our guides on our website, but also it's something we teach on the program about how to balance your plate and provide all the nutrients that your body needs. So there's no one diet that is best. You could argue that the Second Nature approach is all diets combined, because people can personalize it to what suits them best. some people might eat lower carbs, some people might eat lower fat, some people might eat more Mediterranean. We've now got a range of guides for people from different cultures and ethnicities. So whether your ethnic background is Chinese or South Asian or West African, we've got balance plate models to suit all, many more ethnic backgrounds too. So yeah, whatever is best for you. And using the help of our amazing health coaching team, you can achieve.
Just a quick plug for us.
Just a quick plug at the end, for sure.
Amazing. And for people who are still unsure about where to go, because I know there's a couple of questions in here about where to find out more information about the medication supported program, you can go straight onto our website. All of the information is on there, and should be quite easy to find as well.
Absolutely. And just a final note as well, Jem, I think if anyone is thinking about it, like we said earlier, please speak with your GP, your medical team, just have that discussion. I'm not sure, some people's GPs are quite scary, but at the end of the day, they just want the best for you as their patient. And yeah, I think they'll give you credit for taking ownership of your health. So yeah, it's definitely worth speaking with a GP before making any commitment to, because it's quite a big commitment, both financially and also it's a big change to make. So
yeah, agreed. Well, I think we can wrap up now. Thank you so much, Robbie and Deb, for your insights, for all the information that you've provided tonight. I hope everyone watching has found this helpful. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to your health coach or come and join the program, because we're great. But for now, that will be it. We'll be back with our next webinar soon. So I hope everyone has a lovely evening and take care.
cheers, Gemma. See you, Deb. Bye, everyone.